By 1800, the steam engine opened the way for the Industrial Revolution, which marked a major turning point in human history, opening up the way for the technological life we have at present. The life of the people greatly improved as it was seen that machines were cheaper than slaves. This greatly made the life of slaves and common man much easier. This freedom from misery that technology offered was never before experienced by the common man, and it whetted his appetite for more freedom. In 1848, people all over Europe unsuccessfully revolted against their monarchs for their freedom. In 1867, Canada gained her freedom from England. In 1901, Australia gained her freedom from England. That caused nations in Europe to scramble for Africa to get new colonies. The Spanish, the French, the English, and the Dutch were all busy colonizing and exploiting new explored lands. The Germans felt rather left behind, and there were fewer and fewer lands to colonize. The Germans had their eyes on the vast lands in Russia. When in 1914 the heir king of Austria was assassinated in Serbia, Germany convinced Austria to invade Serbia, a colony of Russia, in retaliation to the assassination. When Russia invaded Austria in retaliation to the invasion, Germany invaded Russia to help Austria. In all of this chaos, the Russians managed to free themselves from the reins of their monarchy, just like France did 100 years before. Turkey jumped in to help Germany. France and Britain jumped in to help the Russians. Eventually, America jumped in to help France and Britain. They all ended up fighting in a worldwide war they called World War I. The weapons manufacturers were delighted to be able to put to use the new technologies that scientists were developing, which promised great destructive capabilities as well as great opportunities to get rich. The construction companies were delighted at the prospects of using the newly found resources of the colonies to rebuild what the weapons destroyed. The banksters were delighted to finance both destruction and rebuilding. Chemists soon jumped in to take a piece of the pie that promised great riches. To the horror of everyone involved, scientists developed a very cheap weapon of mass destruction in the form of poison gas that promised to kill at a fraction of the cost of what it took to kill with guns and bombs. To make it worse, the new weapon of mass destruction did not destroy buildings and roads and allowed soldiers to protect themselves by breathing through inexpensive filters called gas masks. The new weapon just did not make any economic sense, and it was eventually outlawed for use in future wars. America finally joined in to save the day. After 4 years of fighting and more than 65 million people being killed, the Germans were defeated and World War I ended. The victors severely punished the losers. The empires of Austria, Germany, and Turkey were dismantled and broken apart. In 1919, shortly after World War I ended, an Italian journalist, Benito Mussolini, was very disillusioned that nothing seemed to work properly in his broken country. He formed a movement, Fascio di Combattimento, which was translated in English as Union for Struggle. They were a group of gangsters who were protected by local officials and police. They were affectionately called fascists, and they terrorized their political enemies, especially if they were communists or socialists. In 1923, the King of Italy asked Mussolini and his party to form the government. Elections were suspended and trade unions were banned. Leaders from the industries and the church were delighted, and trains began to run on time. Jews were greatly discriminated against. In 1933, shortly after World War II started, a German who was once an Austrian journalist, Adolf Hitler, was very disillusioned that nothing seemed to work properly in his broken country. He formed a movement called National Socialists. They did not support socialism for the people, but rather supported the interest of the leaders of industries. They were a group of fascist gangsters who were affectionately called Nazis. They terrorized their political enemies, especially if they were communists or socialists. After they were elected to form the government, elections were suspended and trade unions were banned. Leaders from the industries and the church were delighted and trains began to run on time. Jews were stripped of their German citizenship and all of their wealth was expropriated and they were put into concentration camps to be eventually exterminated. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland in an attempt to regain losses after World War I that it felt were unfair. A second World War, called World War II, started. A new generation of banksters, weapons manufacturers, and rebuilders were just as delighted as their fathers were 25 years before. It was the same countries fighting as in World War I, but with a new generation of improved technology and with the addition of Japan helping the Germans. Scientists developed a new weapon of mass destruction that was more sophisticated and expensive than poison gas and that only the rich could afford. It was a new bomb based on splitting the nucleus of atoms. It was able to demolish large areas that conventional bombs could only damage. Both the Germans and the Russians had very crazy leaders. Hitler killed over 6 million Jews for fear of contaminating the German race, while Stalin killed millions for fear of losing his power. Russia and America saved France and England and won the war. This time, the victors did not punish the losers, but instead helped them to rebuild their country. Europe was divided with control going to America and Russia. Russia got Hungary. Poland, and the east half of Germany. Like they were prisoners of war, Russia built an iron curtain around them and indoctrinated them to be communists. America, on the other hand, got the west part of Germany and indoctrinated them to be capitalists. The Second World War left the colonizers from Europe weakened. African states slowly started to gain their freedom. In 1950, Libya was the first to gain her freedom from Italy, losing it 20 years later to Gaddafi, who held the entire country hostage for 40 years. India also gained her freedom in 1950 from England, who treated India like it was a company. Mahatma Gandhi, with his peaceful, passive resistance movement, helped to achieve final freedom. In 1990, Poland and Hungary opened up the way for the Iron Curtain to fall. Poland elected anti-communists, and Hungary allowed people to cross the border and refused to shoot them. Soon, one country after another behind the Iron Curtain demanded their freedom, including Russia itself. In 1993, in an attempt to stop its long history of fighting, 27 countries formed a United States of Europe called EU, promising never to fight amongst themselves again. The chances of that happening are slim, as the three main powers of the Union are very arrogant. The French proudly claim to be the best in the art of making love and to have the finest foods and wines. The Germans claim to be the masters in the art of making war and are proud to have the best sausages and beer. The English concede to the claims of the Germans and the French, but it is clear that they are superior at colonizing and exploiting. They vainly believe that everyone deep inside really wants to be English. We can learn from Europe's history the art of making war. War is where technology flourishes. It is where our toys are made into our tools. War allows us to conquer and exploit people to the point where they have nothing to lose and fight for their freedom with their lives. Hopefully, the art of making peace by uniting as one and agreeing not to fight that the Europeans have finally learned from Switzerland will last as long as it has for Switzerland.